She came alone, wearing a simple dress and holding a printed reservation. No entourage, no diamonds, just dignity. But to the restaurant manager, that wasn't enough. "You don't belong here," he said, loud enough for every wine glass to tremble. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. What he didn't know, the woman he was humiliating was the reason that luxury even existed, and her daughter, the black CEO he'd never recognize, was already on her way. One call, 12 minutes. A system built on quiet prejudice was about to collapse in public view. The maitre d' barely glanced up as Clarisse Monroe stepped through the arched entrance of La Valliere, the crown jewel of Chicago's fine dining elite. She stood at the host stand, clutching a printed confirmation with delicate but steady fingers. Her pale blue cardigan draped softly over her shoulders, worn not for fashion but for familiarity. The restaurant buzzed with the clink of silverware and the rustle of silk. Hostesses floated like models in tailored suits, and patrons sipped $1,000 wines under golden chandeliers. Clarisse waited. When the maitre d' finally looked her way, his brows creased with the slight annoyance of someone interrupted by the wrong kind of guest. "May I help you?" His tone was neutral, but the subtext cracked like ice beneath warm shoes. "Yes," Clarisse replied. "I have a reservation under Monroe, Clarisse Monroe, party of one." He tapped a touchscreen slowly, his fingers deliberate. "First name again?" "Clarisse." He paused, then shook his head with a practiced sigh. "I'm not seeing anything. Are you sure it's this location?" Clarisse unfolded the reservation email and slid it across the podium. The maitre d' scanned it, then called out over his shoulder, "Bryce!" From behind a velvet curtain, Bryce Whitaker emerged. Tall, silver-haired, tailored like the restaurant itself, he scanned Clarisse from head to toe, eyes lingering not on her face, but her shoes, sturdy, scuffed leather. Well kept, but not couture. Then he smiled, thin and tired. "Ma'am, we have high demand this evening," he said smoothly. "We can't honor walk-ins without verified bookings." "She has a confirmation," the maitre d' murmured. But Bryce ignored him. "I understand," Clarisse replied softly. "The reservation was made last week. Perhaps there's a mistake." Bryce picked up the printout with 2 fingers as if avoiding smudges. "Yes, perhaps." He turned it sideways, inspecting the font. "We've had fakes before. People hear the name La Valliere and think it's a place to try their luck." Clarisse didn't blink. She simply stood, posture straight, hands still clasped. A nearby table grew quiet. Diners watched behind polished menus. Bryce leaned in. "Ma'am, we do have a dress code. Our guests come here expecting a certain atmosphere." A woman at the bar lifted her phone discreetly, the red recording light blinking. Clarisse remained calm, serene even, in the storm forming around her. "I'll wait," she said. Bryce's smile froze. "Suit yourself." Clarisse remained where she stood, her calm unshaken despite the eyes now turning toward her like spotlights. She reached slowly into her purse and retrieved 2 items, a government-issued ID and a printed email showing the confirmed reservation. Her hands didn't tremble. She placed both gently on the host podium, as if laying down evidence not for her sake, but for someone else who might need it later. Bryce didn't even glance at the ID. He picked up the email again, squinting like it might reveal some hidden flaw, some pixelated deceit. Then he laughed, a dry chuckle laced with cynicism. "People are getting clever," he said aloud, holding the page up for others to see. "Fonts, layouts, very convincing, almost professional." He crumpled it in one hand and dropped it behind the counter. Clarisse didn't flinch. "My reservation was made through the direct line," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "I confirmed it 3 days ago." Bryce smirked. "Yes, well, people say a lot of things when they want attention." Then, louder, so the bar could hear. "Last month, we had someone try to fake a booking with an expired library card." Behind the bar, a young server named Renee Carter watched the exchange, her heart tightening in her chest. She recognized the name, Clarisse Monroe. and the way Bryce spoke. It wasn't new. It was familiar. Too familiar. Without drawing attention, Renee stepped into the service hallway and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved fast. It's happening again. She didn't need to say more. The message was sent to one contact, a woman who had once told her, "If this ever happens again, don't hesitate." Inside the restaurant, Clarisse remained poised. Bryce was now motioning to security at the far corner of the floor, gesturing with subtle urgency. "She's not violent," Bryce murmured to the guard. "Just persistent." The guard nodded, walking slowly toward Clarisse, not with force, but with the passive authority of someone used to compliance. Clarisse, for her part, did not move. She simply turned to the maitre d' and said, "Is this how you treat confirmed guests?" The maitre d' looked visibly uncomfortable now, caught between protocol and principle. He didn't answer. From her post, Renee returned quietly, slipping behind the bar. She glanced toward the entrance. No sign of the woman on the other end of her message. Yet. But she was coming. Renee knew it. Bryce stood taller now, feeding off the discomfort in the room like oxygen. He gestured again to the approaching guard, this time with more force. "Escort her to the sidewalk. We'll call it a misunderstanding." Clarisse still hadn't moved. Her voice remained measured. "You haven't looked at my ID." Bryce waved a hand. "We've seen all kinds of clever fabrications. You people will print anything if you think it'll get you a free meal." A hush fell. The phrase "you people" floated like poison through the air, coating silverware and silk with something far heavier than dust. At the host stand, Jenna Moore, sharp eyeliner, sharper tone, leaned toward her colleague and stage whispered just loud enough, "She probably thinks this is the Sunday brunch line at Mount Zion." A cluster of guests at the corner table laughed, the kind of polished, breathy laughter meant to sting without being traceable. Clarisse didn't react. Not to the jab, not to the laughter, not even to the fact that the security guard had now reached her shoulder. Her eyes remained steady, locked not on Bryce, but on something past him. Something, or someone, about to arrive. Renee, still behind the bar, clenched her fists. She'd heard Jenna make jokes before. Not like this. Not this cruel. But it wasn't her place, was it? Servers didn't get to confront managers. Not here. Not in a place where image trumped empathy. Bryce stepped closer. "Ma'am," he said, mock polite. "This is becoming a disturbance. I'm asking you for the last time." "I'm not leaving," Clarisse said. Bryce's nostrils flared. "You don't have a reservation." "I do," she replied. "And someone here knows that." "Who? The bartender?" he scoffed. Clarisse finally turned her gaze to him. "Tell Morgan I'm here." Bryce blinked. "Morgan who?" "Just Morgan," Clarisse said, like she'd said it many times before, in many rooms like this. The silence that followed wasn't long, but it was loud. Bryce scoffed again, but less confidently this time. At the bar, Renee's phone buzzed once. She checked it, her breath catching. One word lit the screen. "Received." 3 blocks away, inside a ballroom filled with navy suits and polished shoes, Morgan Monroe sat at the head of a round table surrounded by city officials, developers, and the lieutenant governor. Her posture was poised, her blazer uncreased, her phone silenced. The topic was urban equity. The irony would hit her later. Her aide, Naya, slid a folder toward her. "Site proposal for Detroit expansion." Morgan nodded without looking up. Her focus remained laser-fixed on the numbers on the screen in front of her, until her watch vibrated, a discreet pulse only she could feel. She tapped once. A single preview line appeared on her phone. "It's happening. Again." Her breath hitched, barely. She stood slowly, gathering her notes. "Apologies," she said calmly to the room. "Something's come up. I'll return shortly." The lieutenant governor leaned in. "We're scheduled to begin press in 20. Morgan nodded once. "Then I'll be brief." She exited the room without explanation. Nia followed her into the hallway. "Do I need to reroute security?" Nia asked. Morgan shook her head. No scene, not yet. Just notify Olivia. Activate Protocol C. Understood. Morgan stepped into a black SUV waiting at the curb, her phone already dialing. Back at the restaurant, Renee's eyes flicked toward the front entrance every few seconds. Her nerves were fraying. She didn't know how long it would take, how close Morgan had been, but she knew the woman well enough to know she would come. Jenna was now gossiping with Bryce near the hostess stand, mimicking Clarisse's voice in a mocking tone. "Tell Morgan I'm here," she said, adding a nasal lilt for effect. Bryce chuckled, but uneasily. Something had shifted. He could feel it. Clarisse, still standing in the same spot, hadn't moved more than an inch. The maitre d', trying to act invisible, busied himself with reservation screens. Outside, a sleek black vehicle rolled to the curb. Morgan stepped out, phone still to her ear. "Olivia," she said, "pull every employee profile at La Valliere. Tag all incident reports in the past 90 days. Any flagged complaints? I want them scanned by pattern." "Already underway," came the reply. Morgan ended the call without another word and entered through the kitchen service door. She didn't need fanfare. She needed clarity. Morgan moved through the service corridor like she owned the place, because in every legal and operational sense, she did. Her presence didn't demand attention. It reshaped the space around her. The dishwashers paused. The sous chef glanced up but said nothing. They recognized her, not from photo ops, but from the quiet way she once reviewed operations on Sunday nights. She reached the manager's office, unoccupied, and keyed in a code on the touchscreen beside the door. It beeped twice. The lights inside flickered on. She sat down at the desk, activated the internal dashboard, and placed a single call. "Olivia," she said evenly. "Yes, Ms. Monroe." "Full lockdown. Initiate Protocol C. Start now." "Confirmed. Executing across Chicago units. ETA, 60 seconds. Morgan ended the call. Within moments, the effects began to ripple outward. At the host stand, Jenna tapped her tablet and frowned. The screen froze. She tapped again. Nothing. "Bryce," she called. "My check-in system just froze." Bryce was halfway through whispering something snide to a sommelier when he turned. "Restart it." "I did." Across the floor, servers glanced at each other. The POS terminals had gone black. Credit card readers blinked red. One waiter tried logging into the floor plan. His password rejected. "What the hell?" he muttered. In the back office, the surveillance feed looped, then vanished. The door lock system shut down with a soft click. Bryce pulled out his phone, tried to access staff operations. His credentials were invalid. "Is the Wi-Fi down?" he barked toward the maitre d'. "No, sir. It's internal." Renee, still behind the bar, kept her expression flat. But inside, her heart raced. This was no IT glitch. This was deliberate. Bryce stepped behind the podium, eyes scanning for the security guard, who was now tapping futilely at his walkie. Clarisse remained still, silent, and completely unbothered. She watched as confusion bloomed like a quiet wildfire. The very system that had tried to erase her was now choking on itself. Bryce cursed under his breath, trying again to log in. At that moment, a soft alert chimed on the podium screen. A message, simple but chilling, scrolled across the bottom in white text over black. "Protocol C, lockdown active. Incident under review. Await executive directive." Bryce's hands trembled. He had no idea what Protocol C was, but someone higher up clearly did. And that someone was now watching everything. Morgan didn't step onto the main floor right away. From the private office, she moved through the prep kitchen, past the stainless steel counters and the controlled chaos of dinner service. Her heels clicked softly but with authority, drawing startled glances from the kitchen staff. None of them stopped her. They didn't need to be told who she was. She paused just beyond the double doors that separated kitchen from dining room. Through the narrow glass window, she could see everything. The gilded light bathing the tables, the glossy menus, the staff scrambling as their systems locked down one by one. Jenna was jabbing her frozen tablet. Bryce paced like a tethered animal. Clarisse still stood at the host stand, motionless. Morgan said nothing. She didn't need to yet. Instead, she raised her phone and captured a silent panoramic video of the scene unfolding. The system failure, the scrambling staff, the frozen screens, all time-stamped and cataloged. Behind her, another figure appeared. Clean suit, sharp eyes. Lionel Marsh, Senior Director of Hospitality Operations. He had arrived from headquarters just 12 minutes after Protocol C was triggered. "Ma'am," he greeted. Morgan nodded. "Status?" he asked quietly. "System-wide lockdown holding," Morgan replied. "Local access suspended. Cameras still live." He peered through the glass beside her, his brow furrowing at the sight of Clarisse. "That's her?" Morgan didn't answer. She didn't need to. Lionel stepped forward, pushed through the kitchen doors, and entered the dining room. His presence, clean and corporate, rippled through the air like a cold front. Bryce turned, confused. "Can I help you?" Lionel flashed a badge. "Senior Oversight, Emergency Audit, effective immediately." Jenna stiffened. Renee froze. "Who checked in Mrs. Monroe's reservation tonight?" Lionel asked, tone flat and unmistakably dangerous. Bryce blinked. I didn't see it in the system." "It wasn't there." "That wasn't my question." Clarisse said nothing. She only watched. Lionel's eyes scanned the room again. "Who reviewed the 7:30 reservation under Monroe Clarisse?" No one spoke. Renee's heart pounded. "I'm asking one more time," Lionel said louder now. "Who handled Mrs. Monroe's arrival?" Morgan still stood behind the glass, unseen by most. But her silence carried weight, pressing into the moment like gravity. Outside, the laughter had died. The diners had stopped whispering. Phones were raised, not just out of curiosity, but caution. Something bigger was happening, and it had just begun. Lionel's voice echoed across the restaurant, silencing even the clink of cutlery. "Last call. Who handled the Monroe reservation?" Still, no answer. Bryce looked around, waiting for someone else to speak, anyone but him. But it was his face that flushed, his fingers twitching against the podium edge. Then, the maitre d' spoke up, voice trembling. "She gave me the name. I checked. It was there. It disappeared after the first lookup." Lionel turned sharply. "Clarisse Monroe's name was in the system." The maitre d' nodded. Bryce snapped. "That's impossible. I checked myself." "No," Lionel said coldly. "You didn't. You overrode the system before reviewing the flagged entries." A soft ding echoed from Bryce's phone. He pulled it out, hands already clammy. "Termination pending. Access revoked." A second later, his keycard buzzed uselessly against the podium panel. He looked at Lionel in disbelief. "You can't be serious. I've worked here 8 years. One mistake and you toss me out?" "This wasn't one mistake," Lionel said. "It was a pattern, and it ends now." Bryce's voice rose, brittle with panic. "This is public humiliation. You'll be hearing from my attorney." That's when the kitchen doors swung open again. Morgan stepped into the dining room, tall, composed, dressed not to impress but to disarm. Her heels struck the marble floor like punctuation marks. Every eye followed her. "I'll save you the call," she said, voice cool and clear, "because I'm the one who authorized the termination." Bryce froze. Lips parted. "Who are you?" Morgan didn't answer right away. She walked forward slowly, stopping beside Clarisse. Then she turned to face the room. "The woman you humiliated," she said, "is the reason this place exists." The gasp was almost collective. Diners leaned forward. Phones rose again. Morgan looked directly at Bryce. "You judged her by her cardigan, her shoes, her skin. You dismissed her at the door of the very institution she made possible." Bryce's face turned pale. Morgan turned to the rest of the staff. Her name is Clarisse Monroe, and long before this restaurant stood on marble floors, she taught me what dignity looks like. Clarisse didn't speak. She simply looked at her daughter, then slowly took a seat, finally, at the table once denied to her. It was the first crack in a system that had gone unchallenged far too long, and it would not be the last. The dining room had gone utterly silent, as if time itself were holding its breath. Clarisse sat in her chair, finally, with a grace that made everything around her seem artificial by comparison. Morgan remained standing, not for effect, but because the truth she was about to tell couldn't be shared from a seated position. "Some of you might be wondering why this matters so much," she began. "Why I walked away from a state meeting, why I shut down the systems of an entire franchise in under 10 minutes. She looked across the sea of faces, staff, guests, onlookers still filming, still watching. "Because this isn't the first time my mother has been humiliated here." Clarisse shifted slightly, but said nothing. 30 years ago, Morgan continued, this building wasn't La Valliere. It was a private supper club, members only, exclusive, untouchable. My mother came here then too. The room tensed. This wasn't on any company plaque. She had saved for months to surprise my father for his birthday. She arrived in a pressed dress and borrowed heels. She waited at the front while the staff whispered. They told her the guest list was full, told her the kitchen was closing, told her she must have the wrong place. Morgan's voice didn't shake, but the pause she took was weighted with everything she wasn't saying. They didn't let her in. She didn't argue. She walked around back, found the delivery entrance, and stood near the loading dock in the cold because she didn't want to cry where people could see her. Clarisse looked down, eyes glassy. I was 7 years old, Morgan said, voice dropping. But I remember the look on her face when she came home. I remember her silence, and I made her a promise. Morgan turned, facing the staff now. I told her one day she'd never be turned away again. 4 years ago, Morgan had made good on that promise, acquiring the entire restaurant group through a discreet holding company. She had restructured from the shadows, improved hiring, enforced ethics. But she hadn't told her mother. Because I didn't want to rewrite history with a press release, Morgan said. I wanted her to be treated with dignity on her own. She looked at Clarisse. But you weren't. Clarisse finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. Morgan knelt beside her chair. You weren't supposed to. You were just supposed to be seen. The velvet ropes no longer mattered. Not to them, not to anyone watching now. As Morgan rose from her mother's side, the room still held its stunned hush. But behind the quiet, something else began to stir. A shift in energy, not from grief or anger, but recognition. And then, from the back of the room, Renee stepped forward. I have something, she said, voice firm but respectful. All eyes turned. Bryce, pale and cornered, instinctively took a step back. Morgan met Renee's eyes. Go on. Renee pulled her phone from her apron pocket, fingers navigating to a file folder. About a month ago, I started noticing certain reservations disappearing. They'd be confirmed in the morning, but by evening they'd vanish. The pattern? Guests with common older black names. Some Hispanic-sounding ones too. Always solo or small parties. Always dressed modestly. Morgan's stomach tightened. Did you report it? Renee nodded. I flagged 2 to my supervisor. Never heard back. Then I checked the staff communication threads. She held up the phone. On the screen was a screenshot of a Slack message. It read, Flagged. Doesn't fit the image. Reassign or remove. B. Below it, Jenna had replied with a laughing emoji and the words, Church hats and cardigans again? Morgan's jaw tensed. I compiled 6 more messages, Renee continued. And there's more in the booking system's audit log. Bryce and Jenna created a manual list. They called it brand filters. I exported what I could. She handed the phone to Lionel, who scanned the screen with growing horror. Bryce finally broke. This is out of context. We manage aesthetics. That's standard in hospitality. Morgan snapped. Hospitality isn't a fashion show. It's recognition. And you turned it into profiling. Jenna stammered. We didn't mean. You meant exactly what you wrote, Morgan cut in. You built a filter. You used it like a gate, and my mother wasn't the first it shut out. Guests were no longer filming for drama. They were capturing truth. The kind that wasn't loud, but undeniable. Morgan turned to Lionel. Run a full sweep. I want every deleted reservation from the past 6 months pulled and reviewed. Any pattern gets escalated. Lionel nodded, already initiating. Morgan looked back at Renee. You kept receipts. You spoke when silence was easier. You just saved this brand from itself. Renee exhaled, her hands finally steady. The room had changed. This wasn't just about one humiliation anymore. It was about a network built on whispers, and it was being dismantled, one voice at a time. Morgan stepped toward the center of the dining room, where only moments ago her mother had been humiliated. Now, she stood not just as a CEO, but as a daughter carrying generations of quiet indignity and the resolve to end it. I want everyone to hear this clearly, she said. What happened tonight is not an isolated failure. It's the result of unchecked habits, silent hierarchies, and dangerous assumptions. She turned to Lionel. Effective immediately, we're launching a full compliance review of every La Valliere property. Not just guest complaints, but hiring practices, staff messaging, reservation trends, everything. Confirmed, Lionel said, already taking notes. Morgan faced the staff, her voice sharpening. But audits aren't enough. We can't fix a culture by watching it. We have to rebuild it. She paused, then continued. Starting today, we're instituting a new company-wide policy, the Clarisse Protocol. Murmurs rippled across the floor. Renee looked up, eyes widening. This protocol mandates that every frontline employee, manager, and executive complete new training, not just on service standards, but on dignity, empathy, conscious hospitality. Because if you don't know how to treat someone like a human being, you don't belong in this business. Jenna shrank behind the podium. Bryce said nothing. His badge still blinked red from the system lockout. And this isn't a one-time seminar, Morgan added. It's ongoing, with real metrics, real consequences. Then she looked directly at Renee. And it needs a leader. Renee froze. Me? Morgan nodded. You saw the pattern. You kept the evidence. You acted with integrity when it mattered. That's the foundation we need. Tears welled in Renee's eyes, but she held firm. I'll do it, whatever it takes. You already started, Morgan said gently. Guests around the room began to nod. Some even clapped, quietly, respectfully, not for spectacle, but solidarity. Morgan turned back to the room. This protocol is named for Clarisse because she's not the first to be silenced, but she will be the last to walk through these doors unseen. She looked at her mother, who had stood up now, her chin held high, and she'll be the first to walk out with every eye finally open. The message wasn't corporate. It was personal, and for the first time, it echoed louder than any velvet rope or marble floor ever had. The dining room had become something else now. Not a place for fine cuisine or whispered power deals, but a space for reckoning. As Morgan finished announcing the Clarisse Protocol, a hand rose near the far window. It belonged to an older man, dressed simply in a navy sweater. His voice was steady, but worn thin by time. My mother was turned away from this restaurant, he said. It was over 20 years ago. She had a reservation. She came early, wore her Sunday best. They told her the dress code had changed. He paused. She never returned. She passed last year. She never got an apology. The room held still, not out of awkwardness, but out of collective understanding. Another guest, a middle-aged woman near the fireplace, raised her hand. Same happened to my aunt, she said. She drove in from Indiana, just wanted to celebrate her retirement. The hostess said they had no record of her booking. She waited in the car for 2 hours while we dined inside, thinking she was late. A young couple stepped forward. "My dad stopped coming downtown altogether after what happened here," the man said. "They made him feel like he'd wandered in by mistake." Morgan listened, each voice adding another weight to the truth she already carried. Then she reached into her blazer and pulled out a small remote. "I didn't plan to show this tonight," she said, "but I think you all deserve to hear something." She tapped the remote, and a screen behind the bar lit up. A video began to play. It was Clarisse, recorded just hours earlier, seated in a sunlit room. Her voice, as always, was calm. To anyone who was ever turned away, dismissed, ignored, or made to feel like they didn't belong, I want you to know, I saw you, even if we never met. I know what it's like to be invisible in a room designed to erase you. Clarisse looked directly into the camera. "And I'm sorry. Not as a representative of this place, but as someone who's lived it. We deserved better, all of us." Silence wrapped around the room like cloth. Then, slowly, gently, applause began. Not thunderous, not performative, but raw. Tears welled in more than one pair of eyes. Morgan stepped beside the screen. The guest list never should have had exclusions. And starting today, those ghosts, the ones left out, will be honored. Their stories will be remembered, not buried. It wasn't just restoration. It was remembrance. And the reckoning had only just begun. The next evening, La Valliere looked the same from the outside. Marble, gold trim, valet lines stretching into the dusk. But inside, something had shifted. The air wasn't just scented with citrus and truffle. It carried awareness. Morgan arrived quietly, hand in hand with her mother. Clarisse wore a midnight blue shawl, her steps measured but steady. This time, no host questioned her. No maitre d' blocked her way. Staff stood straighter. Guests leaned slightly as she passed, not out of scrutiny, but respect. A table near the front had been cleared, linens changed, chairs reset. A handwritten sign stood beside it, reserved, Monroe family. But that wasn't the table Morgan led her to. Instead, they crossed the floor to a smaller space, once roped off, known only to high donors and celebrities. The honor tier. The place Clarisse had once been denied. Morgan pulled out the chair herself and gestured. "This one's for you, Mom." Clarisse smiled, eyes moist, and sat, finally, not as a test or a protest, but as someone who belonged. Around them, patrons began to applaud. Soft, steady, reverent. The kind of applause reserved for milestones, not menus. Across the room, a new frame had been installed on the wall. It featured a photo taken just a day earlier. Clarisse seated calmly in that very same chair, with the words etched beneath it in silver leaf. Dignity reserved, for everyone. No logo, no credits, just truth. Morgan leaned in. "We didn't build this for elite circles. We built it for everyone who was ever told they weren't enough." Clarisse took her daughter's hand. "And you proved them wrong." Outside the restaurant, across the city and beyond, the video of Morgan's speech played on phones, in classrooms, in staff meetings. Not as viral drama, but as lesson. In one home, a little girl with tight curls and wide eyes watched the video from her mother's lap. The screen showed Morgan announcing the Clarisse protocol, her voice strong but soft. The girl looked up and asked, "Mom, can I be her someday?" Her mother kissed her forehead. "Baby, you already are." Back inside La Valliere, as dessert was served without a hint of condescension, Morgan looked around the room. No red ropes, no whispered judgments. Just people, seen, heard, and finally welcomed. And seated at the very heart of it all, Clarisse Monroe lifted her glass, smiled, and said simply, "To showing up, even when the door was never meant to open."